Hello and welcome back to my writing vlog series. I'm working on my novel Nature's Calling, and in this video I'm going to work on chapters 22 and 23. Chapter 22 is the Power Within chapter and chapter 23 is the Action chapter. I'm recording this on the 29th of May 2026. Before I jump into my document and actually write on this novel, I'm going to read you the outline bits I have for chapter 22 and 23. So, the outline I have for the Power Within chapter is: my male MC tries to persuade his girlfriend to get an abortion. She keeps refusing. At last he accepts that it's what she wants, and they both just have to accept the risk that someone in either family will die. That is what I have in my outline at present, but that is not what I'm actually going to write in this chapter. So at least not in this way, because what I have in my outline is based around the fact that Kenny does not want children, but the story has evolved as I wrote it, and now I know that Kenny actually wants to have a family. He wants to be a family with someone and have a child or two, so the child or children can grow up and then take over the ranch someday. So he can't do that unless he has children. And so he's actually on board with the plan, or he's on board with whatever is going to happen. But he's actually on board with this because he agrees with Pamela that they're going to be a family. He wants to have a family with her, and so he might not get to have what he wants with Penelope, but Pamela is a good substitute. He loves her too, and he wants to be a family together with her. This Power Within chapter is going to follow up on what happened in the previous chapter, and that is that Kenny and Pamela visited her parents and it was their anniversary. And so a lot of things were revealed in that chapter. We got to know a bit more about Pamela and her family relations, but we also learned that she's pregnant. Kenny and Pamela both want to have this child. It makes this difficult because her parents, or especially her dad, does not want her to go and marry this rancher. Her dad basically called Kenny a dumb rancher, a redneck rancher. That was the phrase I used, and that was very rough, and that was very not kind. It was unkind of him to say something like that, because it hurt Kenny's feelings, but it also hurts Pamela's feelings. But yet she chose to stay with her parents, and then Kenny had to go back to the ranch without her, and so he needs to find some way to get her back. I'm thinking that what is actually going to happen in this chapter is that he has waited. He has waited a long time for her, and now he's sick of waiting. He wants to know where he stands. He wants to know whether she comes back or not. Maybe I just got this idea, but maybe I could weave in something about Charlotte not wanting him to go, because she has kind of gotten used to the fact that she's alone at the ranch with him and her younger brother, of course, and the baby Hope. But maybe she has started to hope and think that it would be them because Pamela is out of the picture. But I don't know. I don't quite know when to start the chapter, but I'm thinking that maybe he will be at home at the ranch, and maybe he can talk to Charlotte, and Charlotte can be like, "Oh, why do you care? Can't you just stay here with me and then forget about Pamela?" Maybe Charlotte is not that type of girl or woman, but I don't know. I hope to weave in something about her feelings toward him, even though I'm going to write this chapter from his point of view. I can't really tell this part of the story from any of the other characters' point of view, because the novel is basically about Kenny. I don't want to switch out the main character this suddenly and just follow someone else's point of view just because I feel like it, so it should fit the story. I think the rest of the story will have to be from his point of view, though. I had a few chapters earlier that were from Penelope's point of view, but as I'm getting closer to the climax in the story, I want the story to revolve around him and his feelings and thoughts. And so this character arc that the character is going to go on should be about him, primarily at least. But yes, I'm going to figure out something for this chapter 22, the Power Within chapter. But I'm thinking that it starts at the ranch and then Charlotte can be like, oh, stay here with me, but Kenny is determined to go and get Pamela back, and then I can do a time skip, I guess. I can skip some of it because I want him to go to Pamela's parents' house and then confront her, or not confront, but get a hold of her and talk to her face to face so he knows where he stands, and then his parents can, I don't know if they're going to be upset and be against it or if they're going to agree or something. But it really depends on what is going to happen for the rest of the story. But what I'm thinking is going to happen in the next chapter is based on what has happened in the story so far. But I have an outline bit for chapter 23 that I'm actually going to keep more or less as it is. And that is: the baby is born. Twist: the baby's mother dies. Hence, the male MC is once again on his own, but this time with a newborn baby. So I'm going to keep this as it is, I think. So Pamela will have to be the vessel for this. She has to be the one I sacrifice for the good of the story, or for the character arc that Kenny has to go on, or that he's already on, because a character arc is a gradual development in the character and not just something that suddenly happens and then the character is completely transformed. So several things have to contribute to his change of heart or change of mind or whatever is going to happen inside of him. And this thing about the baby is born and then the baby's mother dies, that is going to be as it is. But instead of just some random woman that Kenny finally met and could be with, it's going to be Pamela that this happens to. But now that I have introduced her parents and their family dynamics and her dad's disapproval of Kenny and what he's doing for a living, it will sharpen the focus of the story, so to speak. It will highlight the differences and it will put pressure on my main character, because how is he going to stand up to the pressure that they put on him? Because Pamela is going to die when the baby is born, it's going to invoke feelings and thoughts in her parents, of course, and maybe they blame him and they are going to maybe hate him, just like other characters have hated Penny's sister because she had 2 children and then 2 family members died because of that. So maybe Pamela's parents are going to hate Kenny because they kind of feel like he is the reason why they lost her. They lost her, or they are going to lose her anyway, so they might as well have just let her stay with Kenny. But yes, I'm going to find out what is actually going to happen in these chapters. The outline bits I have are very broad, and so I need to come up with specific scenes that can actually happen in my story that fit together with what I have written earlier. I'll get to work, and then when I'm hopefully done writing both of these chapters, I will get back to you and then tell you how it went and what I wrote. See you in a bit. Hello again. It's about 3.5 hours later and I have now written chapters 22 and 23. So for chapter 22 I wrote 3,971 words, and for chapter 23 I wrote 3,147 words. So in total today I have written 7,118 words. So that's a decent amount, I think. I have spent 1 hour and 45 minutes writing chapter 22 and 1.5 hours writing chapter 23. So far for this novel I have written just above 87,000 words, but that includes these outline bits that I have directly in my document, so I can look at that when I'm going to write a chapter. I think the novel is going to end up at about 100,000 words in total. Maybe the last 4 chapters will be longer than average, or maybe they will be shorter, or maybe they are just going to be average length, but I think that will put me at about 100k. So with regards to what I actually wrote in these 2 chapters, I can tell you that chapter 22 is one long scene where we start at the ranch where Kenny is talking to Charlotte. And as I had planned before I started writing, it's a scene where Kenny and Charlotte are talking, and Charlotte doesn't say it directly to Kenny, but she's like, "Oh, why do you really have to leave? Can't you just stay here? And maybe you shouldn't bend over backwards just because Pamela is staying at her parents' house and does not want to come to the ranch." Kenny checks his messages and he's sad and disappointed that Pamela hasn't texted him back. It's been 8 hours since he texted her and he hasn't heard from her. So he's determined to get an answer. So he's going to go and see Pamela at her parents' house. So then I just do a quick tell instead of show, where I just get him from the ranch to Pamela's parents' house. And then he goes up to, I talk a bit about how he is bussed in through the gate. It's a large estate that Pamela's parents live at, and so they have a very big house, a mansion, kind of. Kenny thinks of it as a mansion, and I also mentioned that this house that Pamela's parents live in are bigger than his own house and that secondary house at the ranch combined. So they have a big house. It's another way of showing the reader that they have a lot of money. So maybe that's part of what makes Pamela cling to her parents and stay with them, even though she should stand on her own 2 feet. It turns out that it was the butler who bussed Kenny through the gate, and so he can drive up to the house and then ring the doorbell. And at first no one reacts, but then the butler comes and then they talk. Kenny and the butler talk, and the butler says, "Okay, I can go and talk to Pamela, but I can't guarantee that she's coming to talk to you." Luckily she does. So she comes downstairs, she goes to the front door, and then she and Kenny talk. And Kenny tells her that he loves her and that he wants to be with her, he wants to marry her, and she's like, "Oh, you don't really want me. You will get tired of me, and I think that my dad is right, that I'm not normal. I can't stand on my own 2 feet and I need to stay here with them." But Kenny doesn't give up that easily, so he convinces her that he actually wants to be with her for who she is. And then she finally gives in and she's like, "Okay, then come, help me pack, and then we can go to the ranch." And while they're packing, they make a bit of a ruckus, and that makes the butler pop his head in and ask, "Oh, what's going on?" And then Pamela is like, "Oh, I'm going to pack. I'm packing up a lot of things, and then I go to the ranch to live there with Kenny." And the butler says that, "Oh, that's all right." And then he's kind of just butts out of that. So he closes the door after him when he leaves. The door, I indicate that the door was open when he comes, but because they're making a bit of a noise, he's considerate of Pamela's dad, or maybe he just doesn't want to alert Pamela's dad that something is going on. So he closes the door. Pamela's dad finds out that something is going on, so he comes into the room as well and asks Pamela what she's doing. And then Pamela finally stands up to her dad and says that she loves Kenny and Kenny loves her, and that's all that matters, and that she's going to move away. She's going to move out of that house and then live with Kenny at the ranch. The scene is semi-intense because Kenny and Pamela's dad have a heart-to-heart, or they kind of fire words at each other like, "You're just filling her head with lies and she shouldn't listen to you." And then they kind of finally agree that, okay, Pamela can move away and live with Kenny, and they kind of take her agency away from her. And then Kenny said something like, "You shouldn't listen to your dad." and you should listen to me, and I love you. And he goes on like that and finally convinced her to come with him. But her dad is no better. He's no different, because he's also like, oh, you should listen to me and not Kenny, and you should stay here. And I'm just going to tell you that if you move away, then you're not welcome here anymore. But Pamela's reply to that is that, okay, I don't need to get your acceptance. I don't need to be let back into this house, because I'm moving away and I'm going to stand on my own 2 feet now, no matter what anyone says. And I'm sure that I can do that. So she defies her dad, and she says something like, it's okay if you don't let me into this house anymore, because I don't need that. But as long as you will let me stay in your heart, that's fine by me. So the tension is eased off again, and it's finally at a place where Pamela's dad can accept that his daughter is moving away for good. So he has done what he could to try and keep her there, but he has to realize that she's a grown woman and should form or shape her own life as she wants to. But maybe she listens a bit too much to Kenny. I don't know if that is going to play into this story as well, that he's going to have a bad conscience because what he said to her made her make certain decisions that then affected her life. That long scene is pretty emotional, but the chapter ends with Pamela packing up her things. They finally finish packing her things, and then they go back to the ranch. And that chapter naturally leads into chapter 23. So that is the action chapter. At the end of the previous chapter, chapter 22, Kenny said to Pamela that he's going to marry her. He wants to marry her, and he wants all of her. She has this bipolar disorder, but that's okay with him. He loves her anyway, and it's okay if she has to take her medicine. But he's like, it's okay if I see you on your worst days, because everyone has bad days and we can figure this out together. And so I think that's kind of what makes her make the decision to come with him, that he can finally convince her that it's the right thing to do. Her dad has filled her head with lies and told her that she's not normal and she's not able to stand on her own 2 feet because of the disorder. But that was just something he said to try and keep her there, I think. But yes, in chapter 23, I follow up on what happened in the previous chapter, and so the chapter starts with one scene. There are 2 scenes in this chapter, and the first one is their wedding. So maybe I could argue that it's actually 3 scenes, but the chapter opens with him standing at the altar waiting for her as she walks down the aisle, and her dad is actually walking her down the aisle. So that's a sign that he has forgiven Kenny, at least somewhat, and he respects Pamela and loves her anyway, even though she decided to go through with this wedding. Pamela's dad is walking Pamela down the aisle, and Kenny is standing there waiting, and as the chapter opens, we hear his inner thoughts. We hear what he's thinking, and he's like, oh, she's gorgeous, and she's so lovely, and she's all mine, and he can't wait to spend the rest of their lives together. So this scene at the church is pretty short. I combine it with a different scene, or I prolong the scene by moving locations. I guess in a movie there would be a cut and then there would be a totally new scene, but I follow them as they leave the church and then go back to the ranch. So they had the wedding party at the ranch after the wedding ceremony at the church. In this chapter, I also mentioned that it was actually Timmy's idea that they could have the party at the ranch. And Charlotte is on board with that too, even though she might actually be in love with Kenny. But Charlotte and Timmy kind of take over and plan this wedding in collaboration with Pamela, of course. And Kenny's like, okay, you just do you, you do what you think is best. And then he's just happy that he's going to marry Pamela. I kind of have a brief scene at the ranch after they have arrived, and then Kenny talks to Pamela's dad. And by the way they interact, I indicate there that Pamela's dad is actually okay with Kenny after all. So he comments on the ranch and, oh, it's a pretty nice place you've got here. So he's keeping it kind of low key, but a small bit of praise from Mr. Lee means a lot, so he's understating it. But Mrs. Lee is there as well, and she observed the wedding at the church too, of course. But she had a drinking problem and she has been in rehab, and that I didn't mention that before, but she wasn't present in the previous chapter because she was at rehab, and then it was only Pamela and her dad and the butler and other employees that were there when Kenny came to talk to Pamela. Pamela's mom is kind of more open and, oh wow, this is a nice place, so the way she says it means a lot. Kenny makes a mental note of how Mrs. Lee seems easier to impress than her husband, but maybe he's wrong about that. Kenny reflects on a few things and he's looking forward to their marriage together. Marrying someone is fine, but it's not the same thing as being married to someone. A marriage takes a lot of work. But he thinks about things and then that scene ends. Then I have a chapter break. And the scene after that is taking place at the hospital. It isn't clear at first, but Kenny and Pamela are talking together, and Pamela is swearing and she's cursing a lot, and Kenny is surprised, but he loves her anyway. And he's like, if you need to curse, then just curse. It's all right by me. Curse all you want. And if you need to squeeze my hand because it hurts, just do that. It's okay with me too. I won't go into details with this scene that happens in chapter 23, the action chapter, but basically the birth isn't going well. So during this process of her giving birth to the baby, she blacks out. I don't know if she's pushing too hard and then something in her brain bursts or something, but she gets unconscious and the baby isn't born yet, and Kenny freaks out and goes like, okay, this is wrong, there's something wrong, the baby isn't even born yet, so even if this random phenomenon hit Pamela, it wouldn't hit her yet, and something is going wrong, and he calls out for a nurse. And then nurses and doctors come into the room and try to save Pamela's life, but unfortunately they can't. But they do manage to save the baby's life. And Kenny is heartbroken again, and he's thinking things like, I can't do this. I can't bear losing someone else that I love, and I can't be a dad. I wanted to be a family, but I'm not cut out to be a single dad. He kind of collapsed at the hospital in this hallway where he's waiting for them to save Pamela's life, but that didn't work. And so at a certain point he hears the baby crying, but he's like, oh, ignoring that, and oh, it's a bad sound and he can't take it, and his knees buckle under him. They give in, and then he just lets his body sink down to the floor. So he sits there crying, and the nurse who tried to get him to walk away gives up and just leaves him there crying. And the chapter ends with him being very low. So he has just lost another love of his life. At some point in this chapter, he's thinking that he didn't think that he could ever love someone after losing Penelope, but he's glad that he was wrong about that because he's in love with Pamela now. But that wasn't meant to last. Some of all of the things that go through his mind are things like, what have I done? What have I done that's so bad that this needs to happen to me? Not once, but twice. Can't I be with someone? Am I not allowed to grow old and gray with someone I love? And he's very down on himself. I won't say that he hates life, but he doesn't really think that life or fate has treated him that well. Life isn't fair, and life has certainly been unkind to Kenny, my poor main character, but things are going to turn around for him again. It's going to get better later on in the story, of course. But for now, this action is what puts him over the edge, and he's going to have another breakdown. But it's important for real people too to have someone they love around them, so there are people there who can help them and do the best to help that person move on with their life. So chapter 23 was a bit rough to write because it's about love and loss. Unfortunately, no one can protect themselves against losing someone they love, but this has happened to Kenny twice now, and I feel bad for putting Kenny through all of this, but it's all part of his personal journey. It's part of his character arc that is going to mold him and hopefully turn him into a better and more loving person. Maybe he will finally stop using humor as a coping mechanism. It's one of the things he does, but I don't know if I will mention that again, but I have mentioned it once so far. That's basically what I have written in these 2 chapters today. So it was rough, and it's personal to me too, because talking about life and death is hard, especially if you lose someone you love. That's it for now. I hope you enjoyed this writing vlog, and I hope you will watch the next one. Until then, take care. Thank you for watching.